I am oftentimes amazed when I travel now. When I was new in the business, I didn't travel too much because my son was born right about the same time I became a full-time real estate investor. You guys know my story. I was a government contractor. I got tired and bored of being a government contractor, got rid of all my government contracts except for one. And my son was born January of 2001. And 9 months later, on September 11, 2001, my one and only contract went down the tubes. Because my one and only contract was, at that point in time, was running the private jet terminal at National Airport. And everybody knows what happened to aviation, and specifically National Airport, at 10:59 a.m. on 9/11. They shut down the airport. The airport itself remained closed for almost a month, but they did not let private jets return to National Airport for another 5 years. And in that process, I lost everything. I was literally 30 days away from filing bankruptcy. I lost my kids' college education funds. I lost all of my savings. I put 2 and 3 mortgages on my house to make payroll because the whole time they were telling us, you will reopen, so don't let your staff go. Well, anybody want to guess how long it takes to burn through $1 million when you have 65 people on a payroll? About 3 months. So long story short, I had to start over, and anybody else remember what was going on in the DC economy in 2001? Well, the stock market crashed, 9/11 happened, nobody was hiring, and then all of a sudden, just when we thought things were getting better, 2 numbnuts decided to run around the Beltway shooting people. Oh, we forgot about that. I got news for you. When you're looking for work, you don't forget about that. And so, after attempting to look for work and seeing there was none, I was fortunate enough, I was blessed enough that God let me meet this guy named Steve from Baltimore at a meeting, and Steve taught me how to flip my first house. And during that 9-month period of time when I first got started, I made over $100,000 as a part-time and then full-time real estate investor. Little did I know that there was a blessing in that disaster, because the blessing was I got to be a stay-home dad and raise my son right off from the time he went off to kindergarten. That is still the saddest day of my life. He left me. And so, 16, so it's just like yesterday. Thank you, Maxine, for rubbing my nose in it. And so I was blessed because while everybody else was getting in a car going off to work, I was running my real estate business, and running my real estate business really looked like getting up, and I'm an early riser, getting up at 4:30 in the morning. Typically I get up early, I do my morning prayers, I believe morning prayers, then I typically work out to some degree, and then I have a cup of coffee and I do what I need to get done for an hour or two, and then I go off about my day. So I was blessed because I could run my part-time real estate business from home by starting around 6:30-ish, be done by 9:30, and spend the rest of my morning with my 3, 4, 5-year-old son, getting to know him and getting to build a special bond with him. All the while making $100,000 a year plus, because my first year I made $100,000, I hit the $100,000 mark in 9 months. And then I started doing other things like fixing and flipping houses, and then it went from $100,000 to $200,000, then I started doing commercial, and then it just sort of like exploded. But it wasn't the money as much as it was the ability to work from home and be there with my son. I didn't have that privilege with the 2 older kids. My wife and I got married, second marriages for both of us. So when we got married, my oldest was already 12, she's 31 now, and my second oldest, my oldest boy, was 8. He's 26 now, or 26 in a couple of weeks. And then David came along a year after we got married. And the promise I made to my wife, because she had been a stay-home mom, was when we get married, and after we found out a year later she was pregnant, my promise to her was, if you want to be a stay-home mom, you can be. Because I remember how precious it was to her to be able to do that when she didn't get that opportunity with the 2 older kids. And so nobody can predict what the future looks like. You can kind of sort of see the tea leaves, and for some of you who are in the government space now, we got any government workers? We got any government contractors? Okay, I'm talking to you. We don't know what the future looks like, but we can see the tea leaves, can't we? You don't have to be in the middle of the storm to see the storm on the horizon, do you? Okay? So in my case, nobody could have predicted what was going to happen 9/11. Well, 9/11 took everything down financially and also took the region down economically. Fortunately, I had met this guy who showed me how to flip houses, and that actually wound up being a blessing because I became a full-time investor working from home. And the truth of the matter is, if I'd known some of this stuff earlier, I never would have been a government contractor because that's way too much work for way too little money. Okay? But the long story short is, the region recovered, the economy recovered, and I personally recovered, and that's when I began this quest to basically not only do real estate, but teach other people how to do real estate. We literally started the real estate club with 4 people when I first got started as an investor. And the one thing that has been different about me from day one, and I tried to change once and I got slapped in the face for it, not literally but figuratively, is I've always shared what I'm doing. And those of you who go to other real estate investor club meetings, those of you who go to other real estate investor meetups, the folks at the front of the room don't always share. Or sometimes if they share, they want you to pay them. And so along the way, I began to share with people how I was doing what I was doing, and the club would grow, and people would ask me, hey, can I look over your shoulder? Hey, this. And it just became, at some point, almost overwhelming. So I decided to go ahead and record what I was doing and offer it up as a home study system. Anybody know what that home study system is called? 21 Days Real Estate Riches. It's not just another home study system, it is my actual real story, and the cases and the examples I put in there are real life examples of the deals I did when I was first getting started and I needed to recover from a major financial catastrophe and make a minimum of $5,000 a month. Because that was what our monthly nut was. We still had 2 kids in private school. The 2 oldest were in private school, and David was certainly in diapers, but I had made a promise to my wife that if you don't want to work after you have the baby, you don't have to. And that was one promise I was not going to renege on. I was not going to go back on that promise. So that was basically my story in terms of how I got started in the real estate business. Now, the other part of the story, which I oftentimes don't tell because I think it can just sort of get a little confusing, is I had already spent about 12, 15 years in real estate as a commercial real estate advisor. I had gotten my MBA from the Wharton School. I worked for a company called Xerox Realty, which built a project called Lansdowne. I was employee number 2. I left Lansdowne, went to work for the Oliver Carr Company, which is a big family-owned commercial real estate company. And then ultimately I set up my own little boutique firm advising governments, DC government, federal government, on how to sell how to dispose of its surplus real estate. I was sort of a boutique investment banker in the commercial real estate space. So by the time I actually got started in residential, I already had commercial real estate experience under my belt. But as far as learning how to do the residential business, I had to learn it the same way most of you guys have had to learn it, which is actually getting out there and looking over the shoulder of a mentor. It's interesting enough, I had an MBA, but the guy who taught me how to do single family houses, in his own words, barely got out of high school. And I literally paid Steve $500 to sit in his car for one day and look over his shoulder. And we developed a friendship during that one day where he said, listen, if you ever need anything else, just call me. So I basically called him about 2 or 3 more times. But the deal was, at that time, I wasn't going to Baltimore and he wasn't coming to Prince George's. So after that first day, it was just sort of a couple of phone calls and a couple of emails. And within 30 days of spending time with Steve, I got my first deal done. And most of the stuff I learned about residential real estate, truthfully, I learned in that one day looking over Steve's shoulder. And it can be very powerful just spending a day paying somebody $500 to look over their shoulder, because oftentimes the first thing you see is, hey, I'm looking in the wrong places. I'm looking in the wrong neighborhoods. I'm looking at the wrong kind of properties. I'm overcomplicating this stuff. And if I just simply break it down and keep it simple, I'm actually going to go further faster than if I sort of overthink this thing. And that's what I was doing. I'd been doing it for a number of years. I'd been thinking about residential real estate for years, but didn't actually get started until I spent that day with Steve looking over his shoulder.